Hey guys, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a super chill video where I just have a drink and talk about my favorite books to celebrate my 21st birthday. I wanted to do something fun to celebrate my birthday, but also something that involved books, and what better to do than relax with a drink and talk about my favorite books. So like I said, this is going to be a really chill video, so grab that fuzzy blanket. If you're of legal drinking age, grab a drink, or if you're not, grab a soda. Grab an apple juice, and let's talk about my favorite books. So I'm basically going to be talking about all the books since September of last year that I have rated a 5-star rating, because I only started reading heavily in summer/September of last year, so I don't have a ton of books to talk about instead of years and years of books to talk about, so it definitely isn't going to be as many as it could be. So let's get into the video. So I actually have my Goodreads pulled up, going all the way back to when I first started logging my books in summer of 2019. So the first 3 books that I rated 5 stars were actually the first 3 books in a series, and it was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, Hollow City, and Library of Souls by Ransom Riggs. And this is one of my favorite series of all time, and it is definitely the series that has made me regain my love for reading. I loved reading so much, and I read daily all the way up until middle school when I had a lot of stuff going on in my life and I went through a couple of things and I kind of fell out of love with reading for a while and kind of all my hobbies. But in the summer last year, I decided to pick up Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children on a whim because my sister had the first 3 books in the series and I was really interested in it, and she said I might really like it, so I decided to pick them up. I highly recommend these books if you love history, if you love fantasy, if you love a huge cast of characters with different complex relationships, if you love just weird things in general, and if you love book series that you can easily binge, then I highly recommend this series. There's currently 5 books in publication. The 6th one is set to publish, I believe, next year. It actually started out as a trilogy, but it got extended into a 6-book series. To be honest, I really loved the original trilogy, and I kind of wish they kept it that way because it ended on such a great note. But overall, I love this series so much. It's one of my favorites of all time, and it has definitely gotten me back into reading, so highly recommend these 3 books. So the next 5-star book I see is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak, and this was a book that was so heavily recommended to me during my high school years, and I just never got around to reading it. But last year in September, I dedicated a lot of my time that month to reading classics to kind of just catch up on what I've missed. And wow, I absolutely loved this book. I was so blown away by the unique narrating style, by the gorgeous writing. This book is just absolutely fantastic, and to this day it is one of the only historical fiction novels I have genuinely enjoyed. And even though there's a lot of foreshadowing in this book and you know exactly what's going to happen, you still just want to turn every page to see how it unfolds, and it still made me cry like a baby. So highly recommend this classic if you haven't read it already. I highly recommend this book if you love historical fiction, coming of age stories, books that will make you cry, gorgeous writing, and unique narrating styles. Then I highly recommend The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. The next 5-star book is A List of Cages by Robin Rowe, and this one is a YA contemporary that I absolutely love. And this one follows 2 foster brothers, Adam and Julian, who got separated after a change of custody, and this basically follows them reconnecting in high school after they've been apart for many years. This is an absolutely beautiful story, and I think you would love this if you love tearjerkers, if you love sibling relationships, if you love found family, then I think you would absolutely love this book. It is so touching and heartfelt, and it was one of the first YA contemporaries that I've read in a really long time where I was like, wow, this just blew me away. So up next I have Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and this is a book that really took me by surprise. I usually have a love-or-hate kind of relationship with classics, and this one I just picked up on a whim from my Goodwill and I decided to read it. So like I said, this is a book that really took me by surprise, and this is the Bronte sister who I think wrote the most gothic style of literature in my opinion. And that's just based on what I've seen from the three sisters. I've read Jane Eyre and I've read Wuthering Heights. I still have to read something by the other sister. I can't remember what her name is to save the life of me. I feel like it's Agnes or something of the sort. I literally can't remember what her name is, but I think out of the three of them, in terms of like gothic style of writing, I think that Emily Bronte had the most gothic. But the story basically follows Cathy and Heathcliff, who are kind of like brother and sister almost, but not quite, because when Cathy was a child, her father brought home Heathcliff, whom he found on the street in the city, and decided to take him home. Cathy's father wasn't a great guy to begin with, but he especially treated Heathcliff poorly and kind of treated him like subservient scum. But for some inexplicable reason, Cathy and Heathcliff are absolutely obsessed with each other. They are inseparable. They have some sort of terrifying magnetism that is bringing them together, and it kind of destroys the lives of everyone around them, including their future children. Because this book actually spans a couple of generations and you kind of see the life and death Cathy and Heathcliff and everybody in their life. This is actually told by the maid of the household, so you have kind of a unbiased perspective when you're consuming the story, which I think was a really smart choice considering what this book is about. So this one definitely took me by surprise, and it's definitely more on the darker side of classics. So if you're interested in two people who are disgustingly obsessed with each other, a story that spans generations, if you're interested in a dreary atmospheric setting, or just like gothic literature in general, highly recommend Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This one definitely took me by surprise. So up next, I'm going to be talking about one of my absolute favorites of all time, definitely in my top 10s. This was my #1 favorite book of 2019 last year, and that is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This one is an African-inspired YA fantasy that absolutely took my breath away last year. For me, this book was definitely one of the ones where you read the first couple chapters and you already know you're going to love it and give it a 5-star rating, and that is such a good feeling. So this book basically follows our main character Zélie, and she lives in a small village in the country of Orisha, and the entire land of Orisha was stripped of magic by the monarchy. And so basically Zélie rises up with a couple of other, they're called magi, who have different kind of like powers, and they basically go on a magical journey to bring magic back to the land and to kind of usurp the throne. It sounds like kind of a basic premise for a fantasy novel, I will admit, but something about this book just really like blew me away, took my breath away. I just absolutely loved it. A lot of people market this book as Avatar: The Last Airbender meets Black Panther, and I feel like from what I've seen of Black Panther, I've only watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, I feel like that's a pretty accurate statement. So definitely pick this one up if you love an unlikely group of friends who all have different and complex relationships, if you like fantasy in general, if you like intricate magic systems. I really think you would love this one. It's so full of lush world building and complex relationships, and it's just absolutely fantastic, so definitely check this one out. So up next, I have Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson, and this one is a YA urban fantasy that basically follows our main character Mila, whose best friend Riley died, and everyone in the whole town thinks that Riley committed suicide, but Mila knows that Riley would never do that. And since Riley and Mila were both kind of amateur witches, Mila tries to come up with a spell to bring Riley back from the dead to get some answers. And basically, in bringing Riley back from the dead, she also accidentally brings back the lives of 2 other girls who died in the same week as Riley, and they were kind of like the popular girls in the school. So basically, for 7 days until the spell wears off, Mila is stuck with Riley and 2 other zombies, and it's just absolutely hilarious. I really loved this book because it was just so much fun, and I just really loved the feminist girl gang aspect and the friendship that they had, and I don't know, I just really loved this book so much, and I had honestly like no quips about it. This one also has Latinx plus size rep, so if you're interested, definitely check this one out. You can read this during spooky time or any time of the year, honestly. This one is just a lot of fun. So up next, I have to talk about The Wicked Deep by Shea Earnshaw, and this one's absolutely fantastic. This is a YA fantasy that I just absolutely fell in love with last year. It's super atmospheric, and it follows this town called Sparrow, where every summer 3 sisters who were accused of witchery in the 1800s come back and basically act as sirens, and they basically inhabit the bodies of 3 different girls and they lure boys to their death. So basically these girls coming back every summer has been kind of a source of tourist attraction for the town of Sparrow, and no one can really get to the bottom of this mystery because the girls whose bodies are inhabited by the 3 ghosts don't have any recollection of being possessed at all. So this one follows our main character Penny, and she is determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. I absolutely love this book, and it introduced me to Shea Earnshaw, who is now one of my favorite authors of all time. I love her writing so much. It's so beautiful and atmospheric, and in her books you really just feel like you're there, and you can tell that she has such a personal connection to nature. So definitely read this one if you love witchy atmospheric books, if you love a good mystery, and you love just like the small town vibes, then definitely check out this book. It's absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend it. So up next, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite books of all time. This is definitely like in my top 5, and that is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This one is a YA horror novel, and this one is kind of like a queer feminist Lord of the Flies retelling, and this one follows a group of girls who live on Raxter Island at Raxter High for Girls, which is an all-girls boarding school, and the island is basically cut off from the rest of the United States after a virus outbreaks on the island, and it kind of deforms the girls' bodies and all of like the nature on the island. It does really gross things like give them scales, second spines, pulsating lesions. It's really gross. I think this is one of the first books I've read where there's been a lot of body horror, and something about this book I was just taken with, and the writing style is absolutely beautiful. So if you love books that are written with beautiful prose, then I highly recommend this one. It's absolutely fantastic. Kind of adding on to the synopsis I already gave you, this is following our main character Hetty, who goes to look for her best friend Byatt after she goes missing from the school, which is really rare and not heard of because the girls are supposed to stay on the school grounds unless they're in that specific group that travels to the other end of the island to get the supplies from the Navy. So it's kind of rare that Byatt went missing. So basically Hetty, with the help of her friend Reese, go to look for Byatt and see what happened to her, and I just absolutely love this book so much. Definitely pick this one up if you love horror, if you love girl gangs, if you love queer books and like soft, tender relationships, and if you just love like creepy things in general. Highly recommend this book. It's so fantastic. I definitely want to reread this soon. I cannot say enough good things about this book. Up next, I have another book that is definitely in my top 5 of all time. It was, I think, my number 2 favorite book of 2019, and that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This one is a historical fiction novel that follows our main character Monique, who basically gets a gig to interview an old Hollywood starlet, Evelyn Hugo, who has kind of become a recluse and she doesn't let a lot of people interview her, but she lets our main character Monique interview her, which is really weird because Monique is like really low on the rung in the journaling society. Basically this just kind of follows Evelyn Hugo recounting her old Hollywood days and talking about her being notorious for having a total of 7 husbands throughout her career, and I really love this book. This book, you can tell, was just like so well crafted and so much care went into the writing of this book, and I just absolutely loved it. This book was just so lovely and diverse, and we had so many different characters of different sexualities, ethnicities, and backgrounds, and it felt like it wasn't trying too hard to be diverse or like to be inclusive. It just simply was, and I really loved that. And the way that Evelyn Hugo was characterized, it made her feel like she was a real person that I was reading about, just because everything about her life was so thorough and well thought out, and the story was just so well crafted. This is one of the only historical fiction novels that I have genuinely loved, and I just cannot say enough good things about it. It was one of the books that really just like hit me in the gut last year, and I just felt like it came to me in such a perfect time in my life where I needed it. So yeah, if you love old Hollywood, you love a good scandal, some drama, you love excellent writing and great characterization, highly recommend this book. Absolutely fantastic. Up next, I have Winterwood by Shea Earnshaw. This is Shea Earnshaw's sophomore novel. This one came out, I believe, in December of last year, if I'm not mistaken, and I absolutely love this book. Reading her sophomore novel really solidified it for me that she's one of my favorite authors, and she's now an auto by author for me as well, because I just love something about her writing. And this one follows our main character, Nora Walker, who comes from a long line of witches, and she lives in a little snowy cabin in the woods, and there's like a big lake by where she lives, and there's these woods called the Wicker Woods, and basically you're only able to go in them on a certain moon. Otherwise, you basically get swallowed up by the woods and you disappear. And this one follows Nora after she finds a boy who is like half dead in the woods, and so she tries to figure out how this boy got into the Wicker Woods, how he's still alive. But anyways, this one is just so much fun. I wouldn't say like fun like it's a rollicking old time, but it definitely is like atmospheric. I just love that about Shea Ernsaw's books. You just really feel like you're there. You can taste the snow on your tongue in this book. Even though I've never seen snow, I felt like I could taste it. I felt cold. I just absolutely loved this book so much. Highly recommend any of her work. So up next is a book I'm not going to talk about too much because I already talked about the first book in the series already, and I think that the same thing kind of applies for this one as well, and I both gave them 5 out of 5 stars, and that is Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. This is the sequel to Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and the second book in the Orisha trilogy, and this kind of follows just after the events of the first book and what happened after the first book, and this one is just absolutely fantastic. I think it was just as great as the first one, and I think with sequels, for me, the fear is that it's going to be kind of like a filler book before the end of the trilogy, but this one was a really strong sequel in my opinion, and it definitely picked up where it left off. It filled in all the holes, and I just really loved it. So definitely check out the series. It's one of my favorites of all time. So up next I have a middle grade, and that is Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga, and this one follows the story of a Muslim girl named Jude who comes to America from Syria for the first time with her mother, and she kind of leaves behind everything she's ever known to get a fresh start with her mom. This one kind of just follows Jude trying to settle into America and go to school for the first time here and make new friends and everything like that, and I just thought this was a really adorable coming of age story. And I think this has a really great positive message, and I think that this would be great for a middle grade reader to kind of incorporate more of different cultures into their reading, or you can just read this like me as an adult and just absolutely love it. This one also touches briefly on the prejudice and harassment that hijabi Muslims face in America and what that kind of viewpoint is like for a child who is just trying to live their everyday life in America. And this book just was really touching and just a great story, and I cried honestly, so highly recommend this one. Also, the audiobook is narrated really well, so definitely check this one out. So up next I have one of my favorite graphic novel series of all time, and that is Amulet by Kazuki Boishi. So I've read a total of 5 volumes so far, and I absolutely love this series. It's a middle grade graphic novel series that follows our 2 main characters, Emily and Navin, who are brother and sister, and one day when their mother goes missing, they are kind of whisked into a fantastical universe. There's an amulet that beholds a prophecy, and I just absolutely love this story. It's so much fun. And if you want high fantasy but you want it in like an easy palatable format, highly recommend this series. It's absolutely fantastic. Definitely check this out if you love graphic novels, if you love fantasy, if you love wacky, zany, and sometimes creepy characters, if you love prophecies and like amulets that behold power and stuff like that, then I think you would absolutely love this series. It's so much fun. So up next I have Tales of the Peculiar by Ransom Briggs, and this one is kind of like a novella companion to Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series by Ransom Briggs, which I talked about in the very beginning of this video. And this one is basically the fairy tales and folklore that peculiar children from the series are told as children. So like instead of Cinderella or The Little Mermaid, this is like the stories that they would be told. You definitely don't have to have read the series in order to read this and enjoy it. It's super short, and I think that Ransom Briggs is such a natural storyteller, and all of these feel like original fairy tales with like a creepy paranormal twist. So absolutely loved this. Definitely check it out. So the next book I have to talk about was actually my first book of 2020 that I read, and I started off on a really great note. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars, and that is Far From the Tree by Robin Benway. This one is a YA contemporary that follows 3 siblings who are all related by the same mother, but they all grew up in different households in the foster care system, and I absolutely love this book. This is so fantastic. This basically just follows the siblings kind of like meeting each other for the first time, forming a really strong bond, getting to know each other, and I think this was just a really like powerful, moving, absolutely lovely story. This made me cry so many times. It's absolutely fantastic. Joaquin, Grace, and Maya just felt like very real characters, and I just absolutely love this. So if you love strong family relationships, if you love kind of a found family aspect because they are like kind of finding each other, and if you just really love a hard-hitting but also very heartfelt contemporary, then highly recommend this one. It's absolutely fantastic. The audiobook is also very well narrated. So up next I'm going to be talking about a middle grade, and that is Amal Unbound by Ayesha Saeed. And like I said, this one is a middle grade, and it follows our main character Amal, who lives in Pakistan, and one day she says the wrong thing to the wrong person and ends up being forced into indentured servitude. So basically she's working without pay for a very corrupt family in Pakistan, and I really enjoyed this book. It was definitely more of like a harrowing read, but I think that the concept and the issue of indentured servitude is put into a very palatable format for a younger audience. So personally, I didn't learn a lot about indentured servitude when I was in school, so if you want like a gateway to the subject in a very palatable format, then highly recommend this one. This is also an Own Voices story if I'm not mistaken, so I just highly recommend this. It was absolutely fantastic. The audiobook is also very well narrated, so definitely check this one out. Up next, I have probably one of my favorite classics of all time, and that is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And this one I always have a really hard time explaining, and I actually really hate the underlying theme in this book, which is rich people. I normally hate reading about rich people. It just like does not interest me at all. And this one basically follows our main character Nick, who is the neighbor to a guy named Jay Gatsby, and Gatsby is very eccentric, I guess you could say, and he throws these giant parties in hopes that one girl from his past will show up and just fall head over heels for him. It's very dramatic. Basically, this is from Nick's kind of unbiased standpoint and how all these relationships within this like group of rich people and like Jay Gatsby kind of explodes. So I just really love this book. I found it absolutely amazing, and I've read it like 2 or 3 times I think now, and I just absolutely love it. It's so dramatic. The characters are so complex. They have such different relationships with each other, and I also really like the look that it takes on classism and just relationships in general, and I don't know, I just really enjoy this story. So yeah, if you guys are looking for a really fun classic, it takes place in the 20s and there's a lot of drama, highly recommend this one. Super fun. Up next, I have Love from A to Z by S.K.L. Lee, and this one is a YA contemporary that follows our 2 main characters, Adam and Zainab, and they basically both end up going to Qatar for different reasons. Adam because he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and he dropped out of school, so he moved back home to Qatar. And then our other main character, Zainab, she kind of gets into an altercation with the teacher because he was being extremely Islamophobic and she's hijabi Muslim, so they kind of get into a spat, and so her mom kind of sends her to Qatar for a couple of weeks with her aunt so that she can kind of like clear her mind. And this basically follows just Adam and Zainab crossing paths. I think this was a really great blend of culture and romance, and it was just so cute and fluffy, and I loved Adam and Zainab as characters so much, and I really liked the topics that were addressed in here, like racism, Islamophobia, having a chronic/terminal illness, and I just absolutely loved this book. So definitely check this one out. It's super good. Up next, I have Scars Like Wings by Erin Stewart, and this is a book I feel like nobody on BookTube is talking about, and I don't get why. This is such a good book, and I feel like it's so underrated. This is a YA hard-hitting contemporary that follows our main character, Ava, and she gets into a house fire and loses the majority of her family, and she gets, I believe, 60% of major burns covering her entire body. And so this is basically a book about Ava coming back to school and kind of the relationships that she had before the fire and how they've changed afterwards, and kind of just her trying to accept herself and love herself and navigating her new body. I really loved this book. It was so fantastic, and I can't speak for like the credibility because, you know, I'm not a burn victim myself, but from what I can see, it was done pretty well. And there's also an author's note explaining like how she did the research for this book, and I just really love this. And I think that the author didn't sugarcoat anything. Like, she didn't try to put it into a super palatable format. Like, she describes like some of the burns, and it was pretty gross, honestly, but that's good because she didn't sugarcoat anything. So if you're looking for something hard-hitting that's gonna make you cry but also make you smile, has cute friendship, highly recommend this one. It is so fantastic. Definitely check this one out. The audiobook is also narrated so well, and I love our main character. She's so witty. Definitely check this one out. Up next, I'm actually going to be recommending an entire series, and that is Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is a sci-fi adult graphic novel series that follows our two main characters, Alana and Marco, and basically their moon and planet that they lived on were at war, and Marco was Alana's prisoner, but they ended up falling in love. And so basically Alana leaves the draft with Marco, and they basically are on the run across the galaxy. So basically they have a baby, and it's like a bastard child, and they have like a bounty on their head, and it's kind of just like them trying to evade all these like assassins and armies that are after them. I think this series is just a lot of fun. It's very captivating, it's very fast paced, and it's like high action. So definitely recommend this. It's definitely for adults though, keep that in mind, because there's definitely like a lot of like graphic stuff, nudity, gore, really bad stuff. So just keep in mind it's definitely for adults. But highly recommend this. It's a lot of fun. So up next I have a book that is definitely going to be in my top 5 of 2020. I absolutely loved this book, and I actually plan on reading it again this month, and that is Orpheus Girl by Bryn Rebel Henry. This one is a fabulous YA contemporary, and this one I don't know if it would qualify more as a novella because it's only 176 pages, but I absolutely loved this. And this is basically a story about two girls who live in a very small conservative Texas town, and they basically both get outed and sent to conversion therapy camp. So this is definitely like a hard to read, harrowing story, so definitely keep that in mind going into it. There's a lot of triggers involved, especially violence against LGBT people, so definitely keep that in mind. So this one's actually a loose retelling of Orpheus and Eurydice. Did I say that right? I don't really think so. But anyways, this one is a loose retelling of that story from Greek mythology, and this one I just absolutely loved because I connected to the main character so much, and she was like one of the first characters who I really related to in multiple ways. And I don't know, I just absolutely love this book so much. I can't really put into words how much I loved it. I cried from front to back while I was reading this book because it's just so harrowing of a story, but it's definitely so necessary. And I feel like if you really want to know what it's like to go to conversion therapy camp, read this book, because from what I've heard, it's actually pretty good representation, so definitely check this one out. So the next book I have to talk about is Woven in Moonlight by Isabel Ibanez, and this one is a YA fantasy that is inspired by Bolivian politics and culture, and I absolutely love this book. This is one of the best fantasies I've read in such a long time, and this one follows our main character Jimena, who is basically the stand-in condesa, or stand-in queen, because the real queen, you know, they don't want her to get injured, so she's basically posing as the queen. And so when the evil usurper Atok asks for the condesa's hand in marriage, Jimena has to take that spot. So it's basically about Jimena going to La Ciudad to try to get the throne back, but also, you know, she has to marry Atok. So I just really loved this book. It was full of so much action, adventure, and culture, and I believe this is owned Voices Rep because I believe our main character, her parents are from Bolivia, or she's from Bolivia. I'm not 100% sure. I follow her on Instagram, so I should know this, but basically, and overall, I just really love this. So if you're looking for a refreshing YA fantasy, highly recommend this one. It was fantastic. Next I have BookTube's favorite, and that is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a beautiful YA contemporary that's written in verse, and it is absolutely stunning. This one follows our main character Xiomara, and she is basically living in Harlem, and she uses poetry as a way to kind of like escape, and she's kind of under the pressure of her mother's thumb, so she kind of uses poetry as an outlet. And so this whole book is written in verse, so it kind of reads like a poetry, and just like the poetry that Xiomara writes is just absolutely beautiful and just like so stunning. All I can say about this book is just read it, but if you do, definitely listen to the audiobook because it's narrated by Elizabeth Acevedo herself, and it's just absolutely stunning. Like, it's so well done. This book is so cohesive even though it's written in verse, which is just like mind-blowing to me. So definitely check this one out. It explores a lot of like Xiomara's relationship with her mother and her using art as an outlet. So if you're looking for like a coming of age story about like finding your voice, highly recommend this one. Super, super good. So up next I have one of my favorite adult romance novels I've read to date, and that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. And this one, like I said, is an adult romance, and it follows our main character, Chloe Brown, and after kind of a near-death experience, she realizes that she really needs to get out of her shell and just like explore the world, which she already doesn't do a lot of because she has fibromyalgia and chronic pain, so she doesn't really leave the house and do like everything that she wants to do. So like I said, she makes a list of all the things she wants to do to kind of improve her life or just to get a life in general, and she ends up completing a majority of the list with her landlord, or I guess he's kind of like a handyman, and his name is Redford Morgan, who is just like a buff but really sweet artist who rides a motorcycle. I just love the characters in this book so much. Chloe and Red felt like real people, and I just loved them so much. They were so cute and I just loved them. One thing I love about Talia Hibbert's books is she puts so much care into characterizing her characters. That's a lot of characters in one sentence. But anyways, for example, our main character, Chloe, she has, you know, chronic illness, and I also have a chronic illness, so I kind of like related to her on that, not being able to do like everything that you want to do. So I really, really liked that. And I also really liked how our other main character, Red, he was kind of recovering from an abusive relationship, and you don't see that a lot of like men in novels in abusive relationships or just recovering from them in general. And I think that she does a very realistic painting of what trauma can look like in people, and I just really like that about her books. She does a really good job. Like, she makes sure it's never just like two people banging, like they actually have histories and pasts and traumas and loves and fears, and I just really love her writing. So definitely check this book out, or any book by Talia Hibbert. I love her stuff so much. So up next I have The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. This one is a standalone YA fantasy that I read in March, and I absolutely loved it. This one follows our main character, Alessandra, who is often overlooked because she's the second born daughter in her family. She's the youngest, no one's looking to court her. So basically she implements a plan to woo the Shadow King into marrying her so that she can kill him and take the throne for herself. So this book has a very overarching feminist agenda in it, and I just absolutely loved that about it. Our main character, Alessandra, was so badass. She knew what she wanted, she took what she wanted, and she was also very sex positive, which I really liked, but she didn't shit on her friends for not also being sex positive, for, you know, wanting to wait until marriage and everything, and I just thought that was really, really cool. I also really, really loved the romance in here, and it read more of like a fantasy romance than an actual just like fantasy book, which I really, really enjoyed. So yeah, if you're looking for something fun that's a really entertaining read with a lot of like fun kind of like little side adventures in the book, and you also get to see her dressmaking because she makes a lot of like cool dresses, and I just really like to read about it. So if you're looking for something really, really fun, highly recommend this one. So up next I have a YA contemporary that's going to be on my top 5 of 2020 probably, at least so far, and that is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. I'm kind of late to reading this one because everyone has read this one and loved it, so... But anyways, like I said, this is a YA contemporary, and this basically follows two twins, Jude and Noah, who are very, very different, and they kind of start out in the novel very close, but then they get very far and distant from each other, and they almost hate each other, and then they get kind of closer towards the end. And this is kind of just like a deep dive into multiple different subjects. So this book centers heavily around family relationships, and specifically the relationship between Jude and Noah, and kind of in their family as well. And I feel like it showed that dynamic very accurately. As someone who has 8 siblings, I feel like the siblinghood was done very well, because it shows like the highs of where you're like besties, and then the lows of where you're like destroying each other's shit because you hate each other. So I definitely felt like the siblinghood was done very well here, and I also really liked the deep dive into Noah's sexuality because he's gay, and it kind of showed him like realizing that about himself, and I really liked the way that it was done. Another thing I really liked about this book is how it included a lot of art, because Jude and Noah are both artists, and it kind of talks about them applying to art school, doing art, and kind of like almost competing for their mother's approval over art. And I just thought it was done very well, because if you're an artist or you make art, you definitely know what it's like to be an artist. There's like the highest highs where you can't stop working, everything around you just disappears and you're just in it and you can't stop working. And then it also explores the lows of art, where you don't want to do any art and you hate everything that you've ever made, you want to destroy it. And I just feel like that this did a very good representation of what it means to be an artist and the highs and lows of that. So definitely check this one out. It's got multiple layers to it and it handles a lot of different subjects. So definitely just like check this one out. It's so good. Up next we have Girls on the Verge by Sharon Biggs Waller. This one is a very short YA contemporary that basically follows our main character. God, I can't remember her name to save the life of me. But basically this is about a girl who has to leave the state of Texas in order to get an abortion, so she crosses state lines. And this is kind of about her journey trying to get an abortion in one of the most restrictive states on abortions in the United States of America. This book is definitely a very harrowing read, but I feel like it's a very necessary one. So I think that no matter what your stance is on the subject, you should definitely read this book, because it definitely touches on a lot of bases, because our main character has a friend who is very religious, but still is, you know, supporting her decision. And just, I mean, sometimes she's like very pushbacky about it, making comments or whatever, but I feel like they have very in-depth conversations about what the subject means to them and everything like that. And I just really thought this was a very necessary and impactful read, so definitely check this one out. Up next, we are moving on to my most recent reads, because I read these books in April. And the first one I have is The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu, and this one is an absolutely beautiful YA fantasy standalone. And it basically is a reimagining of Nannerl and Wolfgang Mozart's life. So if you weren't aware of the history of like Mozart and his sister, I wasn't either, and I had to do a little bit of research after reading. But basically, Wolfgang's sister Nannerl was also a prodigy, but she was overlooked and could not be a composer because of the fact that she was a woman. So she did go on the tour across Europe with Wolfgang to perform with queens and everything like that, but she was always kind of at the side. But in real life, when they were on their carriage rides across Europe, they verbally discussed and came up with a kingdom called the Kingdom of Back. And basically Marie Lu took that real chunk of history and made it into this wonderful novel. This one in itself just reads like a fairy tale. It's so fantastical and whimsical and wonderful and creepy at the same time. I just absolutely loved it. It's very reminiscent of like Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland, because there's like this extravagant and eerie fantastical kingdom called the Kingdom of Back that just randomly manifests itself to our main character Nannerl, and it's basically a place where she goes to meet with like this devilish type named Hyacinth, and basically she makes a deal with him to help him out in order for her to get more recognition as a musical artist. So if you love reimaginings, if you love history, fantasy, retellings of kinds, just check this book out. It is so fantastic. I promise you will not regret it. So the next book I have to talk about actually took me by surprise, and that is You Were Not Alone by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. And this one is an adult thriller that basically follows our main character, Shay Miller, who witnesses a suicide at the train station. And she basically becomes kind of like obsessed with finding out who this woman was, what her life was like, what led her to the moment of committing suicide, and in doing so she kind of becomes entangled with that girl's friend group who definitely aren't what they seem. This kind of reads like an adult Pretty Little Liars, and it's very just interesting and page-turning, and you just want to know what happens. There's like a lot of drama, and you always know more than the main character, so you're kind of just watching her experience it, and you're watching it unravel. I definitely ended up enjoying this one more than I thought I would, but like I said, I don't know how seasoned my taste is in terms of thrillers, because I feel like I'm easily impressible with them because I haven't read a lot. So I don't know if you will like this one, but I definitely did. So if you like Pretty Little Liars and you just like drama and all that kind of stuff, I feel like you'd like this one. Okay, so the last one I have to talk about is my most recent 5-star read, and that is Stargazing by Jen Wang. This one is a middle grade graphic novel that follows two Chinese American girls who become friends, and it is just the cutest darn thing in the whole world. And if you should just definitely read this one because it is so cute. I was smiling, I was laughing, I was crying. It was such a good time. I feel like this one is definitely going to become a easy, quick comfort read for me when I'm feeling down because it's just so good. So definitely check this one out. I really love the art style as well. It kind of reminds me of the way that Steven Universe, the TV show, is animated. So definitely check this one out. It's so good. So I think that concludes my video. I had so much fun filming this video. I just got to talk about my favorite books for a while and it was so much fun. So if you stuck around, thank you so much for watching. I feel like this was a really great way to celebrate my 21st birthday. So thank you guys for sticking around with my channel if you've been here for a while, or even if you haven't. I've had this channel since I was, I think, like 15 or 16 years old, but all my old videos are deleted obviously. But I just have so much fun on this channel and I'm so happy that I'm able to make content like this. So thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe down below, and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss a single upload, and have a great day. Bye!